Hi, everyone. I see people are still logging in. Thank you so much for joining us. It's our first Mentor Mondays for 2019. It's cold outside, it's dark outside. So I'm glad that you're joining us. Hopefully, you've already gotten home. And if you have not, then we hopefully you'll get home very soon and then be able to listen to this while you are traveling, as I know some of you guys do like to listen while you commute. My name is Melanie, and I am joined today by our fabulous BBBA squad, and most importantly, Karen Finlayson and Hannah Reid, who joined the BBBA squad and community as finalists and winners last year for 2018. So, as you guys know, that was Rufus. I have a dog, and he climbs over me on the regular basis. But as you guys know, these are lovely, upfront, kind of organic conversations where we address what is important, the stuff that's behind the scenes, behind the success in business that we have that we've had to go through, really. So the ups and the downs. And what the one rule is that it is very authentic and organic. And so we talk about things on the real. This is not a motivational talk at all. We don't just tell you about quotes that we follow. This is, oh boy, this is what I messed up and this is how I fixed it. That's the kind of thing that we're looking at. So yes, boy, we see people logging in. Hello, hello. Still logging in. Thank you so much. Make sure that you are participating. Talani, lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us. Zara, thank you for seeing. Oh, yes, I see. Well, people are having questions already. If you guys have questions, I'll try my best to incorporate them into the conversation. I am monitoring them. They are on this side of the screen. I am looking at what's happening. We're also looking at our social media feeds and channels as well. So if you want to ask a question there, and we'll try our best to answer it in the short time period that we have. So without further ado, let's get started. And I'm going to start with Hannah Reid is going to tell us a little bit more about herself.
Hey, sure. Thanks for the energy, Melanie. It's needed on a Monday. I have to say that. So, my name's Hannah Reid. I'm currently the regional head of human capital operations here at Oliver Wyman Management Consultancy. So, for those of you who don't know, Oliver Wyman is one of the fourth largest management consultancies in the world, and we primarily focus on financial services and basically advising businesses where problems haven't been solved. That's probably the difference to other consultancies. So we don't have a product. Our product is our people. Just to give you a little bit of overview about the company. So in terms of my current role, I look after quite a huge remit. I look after the UK market, which is the second largest market outside of the US. I also have Ireland, which I set up 2 years ago. It's still growing quite rapidly. And the Netherlands and Nordics, which were actually the fastest growing regions for the firm globally the last 2 years. So super interesting times there. Prior to joining Oliver Wyman, I kind of began my career in the tribunals, so very much employment law was my background. Moved over to the City of London Police, where I spent the bulk of my career having an amazing time. No doubt that will come up in these conversations. I spent 8 years there, and ended up as sorry.
Yes, it will.
Yes, it will. And I ended up as head of HR for the City of London Police at the time, actually, when we had just been rebranded institutionally racist. So very interesting times for me to be a senior female and black in the police at the time. And then left there and went to work for Allianz Insurance for a few years doing a regional role, traveling up and down the country to Birmingham and Bristol and running change programs for them, predominantly large scale restructures, efficiency savings, and started to do that for the whole of the group in the UK. And then from there moved over to Oliver Wyman. That's a very short intro on me.
Lovely. And Karen Finlayson, please.
Hi, good evening, everybody. So I'm Karen Finlayson. I'm a partner at PwC. I'm sure most of you on the call know what we do. We're a professional services firm, the largest in the world. My role there, I've got a number of hats that I wear. So I'm based in our Leeds office, I look after, I'm sitting our risk assurance team, which is around risk governance, controls, regulation, compliance. So actually, I don't do much auditing these days. It's more around some of the broader business stuff that we do. There's a team of about 200 of us in total across the north. I also lead on our health sector across the north. So that includes working with the Department of Health, right through to providers. And as you can imagine, the NHS are quite an interesting and challenging environment to be in right now. And I also sit on our UK board for government and health industries as the regional lead. So I support a lot of our regional teams across the country. I think we've got 9 regions in total. So it's pretty much anything that sits outside of London. So that keeps me very, very busy. I also have a number of non-executive roles. So at the moment I've just got one, but it's with Sheffield Hallam University. So I was alumni there. So I sit on the board and also on the audit committee. So that's been interesting. And NED roles and non-executive roles have been a bit of a passion of mine. This is my 3rd, and I'm looking for a 4th. I'm not advertising, by the way, because I've also got something in the bag. And then within the firm across the north, in particular, I run our diversity inclusion agenda. So there's a team of us that kind of work together, and I lead that team in terms of improving engagement across our BMA population, and also more broader around supporting females and making sure basically that everybody has the opportunity to achieve their potential across PwC, regardless of race and gender. So that is me.
Lovely. So, this is actually quite a phenomenon. So I don't know if you guys thank you so much. I see new people joining as you speak. Hello, Kalisha. Lovely to see you. Thank you so much for coming. I wanted to give people a shout out as they join. But this is actually quite a phenomenon. All 3 of us, Black women, I don't think I've ever seen it before in management consultancies, in professional services. We didn't plan this. This is just that it comes through when you guys hang with us. But we didn't actually plan this. But all 3 of us have really firm, management consultancy, professional services, kind of affiliations and links. And one thing, I took it for granted. I understood exactly what you guys were doing, exactly what you guys said. But if we want to take it a step back, I know in school, I didn't even know, when I say school, I mean, when I was, like 15, 16, I didn't even know what a management consultant was. I didn't know what professional services were. And so how did you guys get into it? So how did you, because even, yes, okay, fine, you've ended up here at Oliver Wyman, Hannah, but there was always that kind of business, kind of strategic, helping with strategic initiatives role that you've had, it feels like, from your background. And so why professional services?
So it's a good question. So actually my last 2 career moves have been as a result of people I've worked with before. So when I was at the police and I made it to head of HR, I was 30 years old, and I was like having the time of my life, but I'm not going to die here at 30. And at that point, I've been there for 8 years. So I started to talk to my management team about saying, what's next for me? I need to move into something commercial. I want to know that I can do more than local government and civil service. And I'm curious to know what it's like to have money and not just be about efficiency savings constantly. So the director that I had at the time shortly left the firm and went to work for Allianz. And then she called me up 6 months later and was like, actually, are you still considering a move? Because I've got a role for you that I think would suit you and what you'd want to do. And the similar thing happened with Oliver Wyman. So again, I'd reached a point where actually traveling up and down wasn't fun anymore. Was looking for a bit more work-life balance and wanted to be in London. Like, I live in London. It was odd that I was working outside of London. So I was talking to my management team about that, and they were looking at a role that I could potentially do in their head office, which was in Guildford, when the previous director, who wasn't my boss, but I'd worked with before, contacted me about this opportunity. It was like, actually, it's a 15-minute commute, plus it's still got that strategic feel, it's got an international feel. Is this something you'd quite like to do? So I've actually been quite... Yeah.
So basically, it was through your network.
Exactly.
So you didn't really, it was a roundabout way. It wasn't that you said, I want to be a management consultant, professional services, and I'm aiming and targeting towards this level of success and excellence. It was more about the job.
it was a mixture of the two, right? It's like this is what I'm looking for. These are my next steps, and very much being open with that management team so that they were aware that this is what I wanted to do next. I think if I had not have said that, then maybe people would have come back to me and said, "Oh, actually, there's this role," but definitely wasn't targeting management consultancy. Just more what's next for me, and what it has to consist of. So yeah.
Okay. And then you, Karen, though your career has been, you've been with PwC much longer, and so before PwC,
Yeah.
what you know?
Okay, so so I left school at 16. I think it's worth noting. I left school at 16 and I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I absolutely had no idea that PwC or any of the other big six, as there were at the time, even existed. And I left school and I did an apprentice actually, to start off in my career. So I genuinely didn't want to stop on at school any longer at that point in time. So I worked just in a local firm in the office, but I started getting into accountancy, and doing sort of basic accounting, bookkeeping. Decided I had a bit of an interest in it and went back to college, night school, and studied. And then I left that company and I went to work for DFS, who were the furniture people, and again in their accounts department, and spent some time there for about 2 or 3 years. But all the time I was going back to college and studying and doing my accountancy exams as well. And then I finally left there and went to work. I went to work for Santander in between that. And then I went into a role it's part of the Department for Education, as it was in one of the agencies, where I got into auditing. And what we were doing were auditing some of the government grants that were given to training providers. And I actually really found it interesting. I really enjoyed doing it. I was involved in developing methodologies, assurance approaches. And that's actually when I sort of realised professional services was something I would try and consider. But it was quite difficult. It's 21 years now since I've been working at PwC. So I'd already had a career before I joined PwC. But I can remember looking for jobs and going to recruitment agencies at the time, and they were very dismissive, actually, of the fact that I'd not gone through a traditional academic route, and, sort of steered me away from going into professional services, that it wouldn't be the right fit for me, which at the time, I found was quite disheartening, but I was persistent regardless. But luckily, when I applied to PwC and they were setting up a team in Leeds that were focused around the government and public sector, which is an area that I knew very well, and they wanted a team of people who had experience. So not only had I qualified at that point, I was part qualified actually. I finished when I was at PwC, but they valued my experience rather than my academic route, and so it was totally a different way of getting into the firm at that time. We still do we have a lot more experienced hires, but at the time I was quite unique. But yeah, glad to say, clearly with the approach has changed now. Social mobility and people coming into the firm, through recruitment agencies or direct is much broader now. But at that time, there was this perception that you had to be a certain mould to fit into professional services. And as I said, I'm glad that wasn't the case, and I managed to get through, and then the rest is history, as they say. So yes, I had quite an eclectic career, and no way did I ever think I would end up being in professional services when I left school.
Exactly. No, I think with professional services and management consultancy, we, if we can kind of, we have the opportunity now to kind of go under the lid. One of the reasons why I love professional services, particularly management consultancies, is I wanted to solve business problems on a consistent basis, solve different problems rather than have an ops role. And I came in as an experienced hire as well. I think a lot of people think with management consultants, we have to kind of go in after doing a graduate degree. And actually, I started at the branch. I was, counting money at the branch in financial services. And that was, it was how I proved to be valuable to my team, because I was the only person who actually had worked in, frontline staff for financial services. And it's a myth that even now, actually, it's even better. Like, we actually have more and more experienced hires, because that practical on the ground experience, industry experience, just market experience is so much more valuable. And this is coming from an MBA professor. So I have both. I wear both hats. Where I can see the value, but then, and a good consulting firm brings everyone together, and it kind of puts them both. So there's an opportunity for you. Additionally, professional services pays a lot more money. Let's just keep it 100. No, I knew that there was this myth. Maybe it was always this talked about that professional services salaries start where industry salaries stop. Like if you get to partner and you keep on going and you keep on going, then there was this kind of not unlimited, but it certainly, because they are certainly private firms, the salaries weren't regulated in the same way. And so because, of course, as you guys probably could guess it, salary and finance and, compensation was important to me at that. So that's why I was particularly attracted to it. And I haven't found it wrong. I'm not saying I found it right. Wrong. That's all I'm saying. So when you go out, the work-life balance costed. My work-life balance, it cost me my work-life balance. I didn't have any.
I think that remains a problem, right? In the industry, that remains a problem. And I think that it's a shame. So until you get to principal partner, when you could start to shape things a little bit differently. But certainly it remains a problem and a challenge for us in terms of, I think it's a sad thing to say, oh, that's just how the sector works. I think I'd like to see our partners being a bit more creative about our utilization and how we bill, and whether or not we can start trialing things that are a bit more innovative. And I know other firms do, but I think we have a way to go still on work-life balance.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think technology helps. So we don't have to be sat in the office. And that does help flexible working. I know we've been a big promoter of flexible working, but I had that question asked me today of someone who's just started the firm and said, how can I maintain my work-life balance? How can I embrace flexible working but be seen to be working hard and playing hard? And it is something you consciously have to work at to make sure that, if you do work hard, that you take the time out, you don't compromise on those things that are really important, and make sure that you don't feel that you're being exploited, because, unfortunately, it is a hazard of the job, professional services. You do have to work very hard.
Yeah, it is. But then, but you guys are doing really, really well in it. So it feels like you did sacrifice.
Yeah.
I guess, do you guys see yourself as successful? That's a yes or no.
I think other people probably see me more successful than I see myself as successful, because it's one of those things that kind of creeps up on you. So within the BBBA, I live in Doncaster. I was born in Doncaster. I'm sat here, not for about 8 miles from where I lived. I travel around all the time, so I've just kept this as a base. And actually, my friends and people who I grew up with don't see me as any different. I'm very conscious of how people who see me on the outside world see me as successful, but I still see myself as somebody who is hardworking, very humble, and recognise the impact I can have on people. But I try and keep it real, as they say, and not get too carried away with it all, because success, is not only the external things, but it's also about how you live your life on a day-to-day basis, personally, with friends and family as well. That's also very important to me.
Okay, so when did you realize you were a success?
Probably when I made partner, actually, because although I'd kind of been there 21 years and worked my way up, it is something that is a real sense of achievement, and something that actually is quite hard to achieve. So that's when I personally felt I'd really hit a key milestone in my career and my life. But arguably, people might have said I was successful already before then. But for me, that's when it really landed. The 21 years of hard work and how important that had been. So yeah, that was probably a landmark time for me. That was in 2015.
And the thing is that a lot of people don't understand that, the consultancies it's a partnership model. So can you explain a little bit the difference between being a senior executive in another firm versus being a partner in a consultancy? Anyone? Like, what would be, just some of the, it's just like, all I know is partner, Mel. I don't know anything else. Because it's the I guess it's the roots to success, right? And so you can't be what you can't see. We always say that, but I think that that concept of partnership in regards to what does that mean? We're not talking about being the CEO. We're not talking about what does a partner mean for those who have no exposure to professional services and management consultancy or even like law firms. Because I always say it means I take responsibility for not just my part of the business, but actually I have a vested responsibility in the success of the whole business in a way that's more comprehensive than, a C-suite person.
So, I always, something that was said to me years ago was the hardest ship to sail is a partnership because of that reason. It's not hierarchical. It's very matrix in terms of how it operates. You do have your own kind of part of the business to run. So in some respects, you ought to be quite entrepreneurial and run your own mini business, but it's a mini business within a bigger business. And that means you have to work together be very collaborative with your fellow partners to make sure that you can sort of lever off each other and they get the best out of each other. So if anything, I would say it's that complexity of the matrix structure that can lead to challenges around how you manage some of those relationships. Whereas if you've got a hierarchical structure, it tends to be a little bit more obvious about who your direct line managers are. I don't know if it's the same for you, Anna.
A little bit different for us because we're not equity. So ours are salaried employees, which just for people listening means that you're not sharing basically the revenue that's generated. It means that they're salaried employees, but they manage their portfolios in the same ways as other partners in equity firms. So the structure that Karen described is the same for us, and the way that we would carve up the money is, I get into details, but it's through effectively team shares, because otherwise there's no incentive to work together. You just get everybody competing, which you get anyway, to be fair, a little bit. But with the team shares, it starts to drive some of the other behaviours that we have that we see in others.
But then but you're both client services, and so what's the difference between, I guess, client facing versus a customer facing firm? Because I know I have my own anecdotal stories about, just the client coming first, the client. And so, what's the difference, you think? Particularly, Hannah, like in terms of, the difference between when you're working with Allianz and then coming over to Oliver Wyman, like a very different like the end of the supply chain is very different, right? So I guess is there an added pressure?
Yeah, definitely, because the drivers are different. So for the most of my role is obviously supporting those partners that I've got in the business. So, I mean, there are synergies in terms of you're always thinking of your end user, so be that the customer of a product or be that the client. But yeah, everything here is very client centric. So all the models formulate around the client. So the business changes so rapidly because at the moment the client demand is changing constantly. So where we market, how we grow, all of our strategies are constantly moving because we need to keep up with our competitors. Or the fact that the clients are also at this point in time, are very clear on what they want and what the requirements are and how expensive it is actually to engage in consultancies makes it different. And then for me personally, the need for retention has never been so crucial, right? So the people leave and the talent leaves instantly. And that becomes a challenge, right? In terms of what do we do on a project or how we become more agile. Is so focused on people retention, and it isn't necessarily the same way in Allianz. I mean, someone would leave in Allianz the same day a job advert was out for them, and I was just like so shocked at that kind of pace for replacement. So it almost, the value of that person is diminished almost, versus here it's almost, well, what else can we do? So that talk about work-life balance that people might hear, that has a huge emphasis here, right? Because attrition has value. And it affects the bottom line pretty quickly. So that I would say is the client's driving it, but that need to understand, my client, if you like, and what we need to do to make sure that we retain them and make sure that they feel supported is more crucial.
So both of your roles are pretty intense. So when we say work-life balance, what is the life portion look like for you?
Outside of PwC, yeah?
Exactly. And not direct roles either.
Not what, sorry? Non-executive roles.
Yeah, the non-executive roles. I'm talking about the
real stuff.
yeah,
Family,
friends.
friends.
The other part of your life.
Question: do you have a life?
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting one, and I think back to your previous question about like success. So I think for me, for a long time, success was making it home to put my kids to bed or spend time with my husband, and that was what my success. That was what defined me, because I am more than just Hannah Reid at Oliver Wyman in that sense. So I think work-life balance, and I always recognise that these roles have a greater demand than some of the other ones that my friends do, for example. Work-life balance to me basically is making sure that I see my husband, I see my children, I see my friends. And when I say see, I mean at a time where there's some structure and routine as best as possible. And that the weekends are mine and they're not me working through the weekends or just all of the evenings. So and I feel like I've got to that point now, but being honest, looking back at my life, there were moments where I didn't have that balance and I didn't have that structure. And keeping it real, I had my first one very young. So I was like doing all of these things to try to get somewhere in life while simultaneously raising a son, right? And trying to be a wife. My husband's listening now, maybe I should mention that part too. But in terms of keeping it real, that was hard, right? And I didn't, being honest, I didn't know how to do both. I just didn't. And there was probably a point where I was not succeeding at both, and that was frustrating to me. And I think it's got that point where I just had to say it's just enough's enough, and I genuinely believe you can have it all. It's just being comfortable within yourself that you can't be at absolutely every single event, for me anyway, as a parent, every single event that your child has, and instead make your children comfortable that you won't be at every single thing that they do. And when I say every single, I mean every single, because there's like a million things that are happening. So the things like that is how I kind of dealt with it, was being at peace with myself.
That's really good. Easier said than done though, right? Because I still beat myself up for not attending some stuff. Like, I should go to that doggy walking class or something. I should.
Exactly. And I say to my son, like, I might not be there. This will be the one I don't make. And then I'll kill myself to get there. I'll be like rearranging meetings, having conversations off the train and get there. And then like he was on for like 10 minutes and he has no idea what I took just to be in that moment. But I think over time, as that, I've just got to get more comfortable. It's more myself, right? Because really, ultimately, especially the way the world is today, they're okay, right? They've got their mum, they're close. They know that I've got their back, I'm supportive. And they know that what mummy does is important. It fuels their lives, right? To be able to have holidays and all those lovely things. But I think it's about being comfortable with yourself, that at least one thing you have to be doing well, because otherwise you're doing both badly, and that doesn't feel good either.
Again, at least choosing what you're focusing on. And Karen?
Yeah, same. So my son is 15 now, so it's a pain trying to get him to spend time with me is a luxury these days, other than picking him up from somewhere or taking him out. But no, on a more serious note, I agree with Anna totally. There were things that I would compromise on, and there were things that I would, class as credits in the bank. So there were things, football was his passion. So I used to take him to football. It wasn't mine, it is now. Take him to football matches, take him to training, be there for him. I wouldn't do the pickups and drop-offs every day. I'd make sure that he was very clear about the things I could do and couldn't do. Because he used to come home when he was at primary school saying, "Oh, why can't you come and read in the class with me, Mum? I want you to." And we had a conversation like, "That's never going to happen because I've got a full-time job and trying to make things balance." So it was, and not feeling guilty about it, and just making those choices and being clear on those choices and why you made those choices. And again, he's happy, he's balanced, he feels loved, he's supported. And as I said, he's 15 now, so he just wants to spend time with me on his terms. We've got a dog as well, so but I did take him to training classes, so that was my sort of release outside of that. And I have a partner again, and so I tend to kind of sacrifice a lot in the week, but at the weekends I tend to make quite, sacrilege. And so my time is spending time out walking, being in the countryside. It's one of the things I really love to do, or shopping. It's the other thing. But yeah, I think it's definitely important to have those boundaries, those things that you will compromise on, and those things that actually you need to keep quite sacred. Because I think it's important that you then you don't feel that you're giving too much. And I genuinely do feel that I have one way or another made it work. I genuinely, there have been times that I've had to work late, I've had to work weekends, but at the same time, then I've been able to choose and may have a weekend off and make sure I put time in my diary that I have some downtime. I know it gets easier as you get more senior, I have to admit, but I think it's important that you have those boundaries so you just feel comfortable in yourself about the choices that you've made.
And so how do you make yourself, or how do you sharpen your sword? So you rest and you have work. How do you get better in terms of goals or acquire new skills? Like, what kind of, do you follow a process, like, or do you actively think about it, or do you your job just gets bigger and bigger, and so you have to get better and better to handle it? Like, how do you develop self?
So I read a lot, and you can't see all the books in this room because of that side of this room. But I read a lot. So I love inspirational books. I love kind of books about inspirational people, and I'll re-energize myself. So like Michelle Obama, like Tony Robbins was probably the first book that I ever got into sort of 20 years ago. Jack Cranfield, that kind of stuff. So I've always kind of read those kind of books from being probably in my mid-20s. And then every sort of 6 months, I generally do take some time out. So one of my little kind of havens is I always go to a spa twice a year on my own with nobody, and a book and a journal. Just for the day. Just for the day.
I feel like I need to.
And no one's allowed to come, no friends, not my partner, and I take lots of books and a journal, and that's when I kind of think about, okay, what do I want to do next? What are the things I want to work on? What do I want to reflect on? And and then obviously I have a coach who I can tap into at PwC, someone I can go to who can support me if I have a particular challenge about something that's work related, which again, she's great. So I do feel quite supported in that, and not every organisation has that luxury, and I always make sure I reach out for mentors, people who inspire me, and people who I look up to that can give me advice if I ever need it as well.
Whoa, okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. Okay, we're going to talk about books later, everyone. Don't worry. I know Zara is on the line, and she's all about the book recommendations. Don't worry, I got you. We'll come to that question afterwards. I will not forget it. But when you say you have a coach and the coaching and the element, and so you do have a PwC coach, but it's really tough. Like, do you recommend people getting a coach? So even if it's not work assigned, do you recommend people getting a coach? Wow, Hannah is nodding hard. So I feel like Hannah's she's up in that coach life.
Honestly, so so there's like mentoring and then there's coaching, and there's a difference. And I think often people don't understand the two. And I got a coach last year through work, but they don't work for Oliver Wyman, so it's an independent coach. Actually, I'm seeing him tomorrow, just to update him on my life changes. And I think the need to do that was very much driven by the fact, a bit like what Karen's saying, there's a lot of self-motivation in life. Like, okay, I think I want to do this, and I think I want to do this. But having a coach is really helpful to kind of unpick, for me anyway, personally, the things that are not at the front of my mind, right? They're at the back of my mind. And seeing something in me that's almost like, this will be good for you, or this will be good for you, or have you thought about this, or why have you approached this in this way, in a way that you're not at this level, certainly you're not doing your management, so it's almost like, where's that driver going to come from? So I thoroughly recommend coaches. Now I'm like, all the time to my partners, actually, same thing. I'm constantly like, I think it's time for you to get a coach to help you. So even if that's transitioning from role to role, that's really quite crucial as well. And it's someone who understands business. So you've cut all of that part out. They get that, but they're looking at you and what your needs are, and purely focused on you. So I couldn't recommend it more personally.
So you said that it's kind of affiliated through Oliver Wyman, but not really. So how, did you gel with your coach the first time? Like, what do you tell your coach? Do you say, hey, coach, this is what I want to do? Do they ask you the right questions? Because this is really we're not very good as a race with kind of therapy and coaching in regards to sometimes there's a stigma associated to it. And my friend Karen, she has, her coach was like, Olympic athlete, and she just coaches to excellence, and so it is proven that it really, really works, a performance coach. So how do you pick one? Like, did you like the first one?
So this was my first coach, not mentor. So I've been mentored before. It's my first coach.
Yeah, I'm talking about it.
Yeah. So one of the things that we do at Oliver Wyman, one of the things I'm responsible for at Oliver Wyman is our coaching services. So I meet with one of the providers, LHH Penner, who also do outplacement services, retirement, stuff like that. And I meet with their account manager, who's the partner, actually happens to be a black man as well, actually, and that's been quite helpful in terms of me just being candid with him at the end of our own discussions about business. And it was him actually who was saying, oh, we could also put you in touch with coaching, because we do it not just from, for the partners who I focus on, but we do it for professionals as well, senior professionals as well. So the way it works is you would have, and actually most organizations, for people listening, have these tools. We don't actively publicize ours. It's normally me saying to people, now's the time for you to engage a coach, whereas mentoring, I think, is publicized much better in organizations.
Yes.
So people should ask, and I say that to people when they're transitioning to roles. I'm like, ask, because you probably will find that there's some kind of budget for it. And we also do coaching when women are returning from maternity leave as well. That's becoming more and more significant. But you get a beauty parade. So you say what you want and what you're looking for, and then you get to meet different coaches. And you have like an intro session for an hour to get to know each other and why you think you're interested in coaching, that kind of thing, which was so much fun. And I just want to work with everybody. I found different things and different people that really resonated with me. But the person I ultimately ended up choosing was a former CEO of Barclays. And it was just that, like you said, it was more around the connection, because as far as business acumen, all of them could have been my coach. It was more who will I get along with and who read me most from the interaction that was.
Oh, brilliant. And so we've spoken about coaching and mentoring, and then Karen, I have to come back to you for the books. Don't worry, I got you. So, I'm very interested to know. So if you have 3 books that you would to someone else that you would gift to yourself 15 years ago, what would those 3 books be?
3 books, okay. So the first one, which is my favourite book, and I must have bought this book 8 times, and I've just given it another version away, and it's The Chimp Paradox by, I can't think of his surname now, Stephen. Is he a psychologist? I think he's a psychologist, psychotherapist, and he talks about it's about mind management, basically, how you manage your brain to deal with stress and to manage your life better. So that would be the first one. I love that book. I bought about 8 versions for different people. And then the other one would be Awaken the Giant Within. So that was Anthony Robbins. So that was the first book I read that kind of really made me shift my brain, my mindset about success and about how I see myself, how I dealt with failure, how I dealt with success. And kind of really set me on a path of where and who I wanted to be. And the third one, actually, I'm just looking at my shelf now. It's a good question. I like Jack Canfield. So again, The Success Principles and that again was one of my first books that I read that got me kind of into business and thinking about, how to apply yourself in business. And again, it talks about, you develop success through failures and how to overcome, confidence and to go out there and sell and do all those great things. So yeah, that would be my number 3, I think. I
love that book, but let's keep it real. That book is like this thick, everybody. So, it's the kind of book that you got to dip in, dip out, like it's deep. Sometimes, you can't just apply everything all at the same time, or else a lesson in self-destruction. Talani has a question, actually, Hannah, before we go back to your books. She wanted to find out, how do you recommend the best way to find a coach? Both of you. the kinds of things that you look, not just the kind of things you look for, but what's the best way of finding a life coach or just a coach?
So, as in, if it's in terms of like where to find one, so I think there are many organisations that kind of lead in this space, and I think that's actually quite difficult to deciding on the provider. I mean, I purely would say Penna because we work with them, and they have independent coaches. So my coach has his own coaching company, and I don't know if you have somewhere we can add things. I can send a whole list of some of the top places that you can go to find independent coaches as well. But really, you should start by kind of understanding what it is you want to get out of coaching. So if it's about like, how do I get to the next level? If that's what it is that you're looking for, then really you want a coach who's in your industry or in your sector. But if it's about just yourself and actually seeing where you go on the journey, then actually you can work with anybody. It doesn't have to be someone who's, like, for example, my coach wasn't in HR, and that was deliberate. Really, I didn't really want I wanted someone who was more focused on the business side of things and what I had to do, or that could see something in me that I needed to kind of work on that I wasn't necessarily seeing myself. So I think really you have to start from there, and then it's just like anything else. There are tons of things, there are tons of people, and trying to find those synergies and someone that you can ultimately work with. But just know that it doesn't last very long. So typically coaches are going to give you, 6-8 sessions at best. It's not like a mentor that can go on, and you can then start seeing them in a couple of months. It's very targeted, very focused. So go into it with that in mind so that you can get the most out of your session.
Okay. Karen?
Yeah, not much else to add to that really. I agree. It's the difference between a coach and a mentor, and coaches tend to be very more goals specific, where mentors are kind of more, I suppose, wisdom sages, that kind of thing. People you download to. So yeah, be very clear, because I actually only started looking at a coach because someone recommended and said, I came up with a work dilemma, and someone said to me, oh, we have coaches in the firm, which I kind of knew, but I reached out, and a bit like Hannah, had a few presented to me, and there's one particular coach that I work with very well who's known me from years, so she knows my style, she knows how I work, and she's helping me kind of solve my dilemma. But yeah, it'll probably be for the next sort of 6 to 8 months, and then I'll have got over that and moved on. So yeah, but the advice that Anna gave was fantastic. Yeah.
Talani,
ask as well, like, do you want a male coach? Do you want a female coach? Big difference, right, in the advice that you're going to receive. Do you want a black coach? Do you want does it matter? All of those things are worth thinking about, because before you go into it, if you don't have a thought process, that could influence the outcome. For me, I found it helpful that my coach was Asian. So if I talked about like challenges that I was facing, it was someone who understood what I was talking about. Whereas if it was just a general business problem, that wouldn't have been an issue. But if I feel like I'm stagnated, or if I feel like there's a concern at work, not saying that there is, but if I felt that way, I would have felt comfortable enough to talk to somebody who could at least identify what I was talking about.
Yeah, I really do look at what you need and want, because I do find that it is a saturated market, and there are many independents out there as well. And so probably useful for you to understand how they've helped others in the past. Obviously, they won't be able to give you names, but just just ask them, how have you helped other people in the past in this area? But that means that you have to do a bit of self-reflection and analysis to say, what do you actually need? What are you looking to do with your own life, and how, can they support you and challenge you? Because you know what, there's no point in paying for a sycophant. You can just, look at the mirror and talk to yourself. You don't.
I can say what they specialize in, because some companies specialize. So, for example, like that return to work, some are specializing purely in supporting women that workplace return. Some specialize in financial services. There are different specialisms that some of them offer as well.
Exactly. Oh, it's brilliant. And so back to Hannah and your 3 books. We have, just to recap, Awaken the Giant, Tony Robbins, The Chimp Paradox, Steve
Peters. It's Stephen Peters. I remembered.
And then The Success Principles, Jack Canfield. And so, Hannah, the 3 books that you would gift to yourself?
That's a very good question. I'm always asked about books, and I genuinely don't have any books. And again, I should have thought about this before. I'm not someone who's actually, I think maybe because of like my HR background, where we're constantly deep in theory, and reading about books and all that kind of thing. I never really went on to read any that I've been inspired by enough to want to share a list, to be fair. So sorry, everybody. I don't. I'm more so someone who, like, if, you know, now that Karen said that, will pull out articles or look up stuff about those people. But there isn't really a book that I've read enough that I would say, yeah, this.
How do you inspire yourself?
It's with people. So it's very similar to what Karen said. It's been finding, but like, real life people that I've met, that I've said, actually, if I've gone to a seminar, I'm very big on that, like seminar, conferences, constantly networking, and meeting people and hearing speakers who have spoken about different topics, whether it's been, you know, that, so with their FSA, their CEO, when it was used to be a female who gave a talk, for example, and she has 8 children, and that was very inspiring for me at the time, about how you have
amazing.
Amazing. And then she came back after the break to clarify she gave birth to all 8, because we were like, oh, surely these are some, like, maybe it's a blended marriage. And she was like, no, I gave birth to all 8 of the children. So it's been through things like that, or as I say, where I've gone to places and met people and heard them speak and been inspired by their journeys, and started to think, actually, I'd like to do that. Or even, you know, hearing some of Karen's advice, I'll take from that. So I'm like a sponge where I go, versus reading anything that's really made me feel like, actually, this has made a difference or changed me. Just being honest.
Okay, so I'm in Friday. I'm speaking at an event. Well-being is your wealth. Your wealth is well-being. Well-being is your wealth. Well-being and wealth. And so, you know, you guys, again, 2 successful women. How did you navigate the, I guess, income, remuneration, finance aspects of your career and how it grew over the years? So, you know, like, you just start to make a little bit more money, you know, in terms of the discomfort. How did you have a really good grounding? What was your background in the financial bit of your life? You know, once you started to make a little bit more money, a little bit more disposable income, what was there any kind of interesting stories around that? Ooh, you guys are both gritting teeth at me. So yes, feels like you're.
That I was really lucky, actually, that my mother, she was a single mum, raised 2 girls, bless her, on her own, and she was brilliant with money. She was really, you know, money savvy, and she used to kind of save for us and you know, teach us about banking and managing money, because obviously living on a very small budget, she was very good at it, and she kind of helped us do that as we were growing up. And my second experience actually was when I worked for Santander. So it was Abbey National, actually, at the time. It wasn't Santander. And the talk about learning about how to manage your money. It's what, sorry?
I had my baby account with Abbey National. I still have it. Well, now it's Santander, obviously.
Yeah. But I tell you, what an experience of, because I dealt with all, particularly mortgages. So it was like, you know, setting up mortgages. And it was in the 90s when Margaret Thatcher was, and mortgage rates were so volatile. And seeing people sort of, you know, lose everything and having to remortgage the house and going into arrears and things like that was quite an eye-opener for me. And so I was always very disciplined with money. But I'm quite prudent, actually. My lifestyle is quite modest, other than my shopping. But yeah, I think I always had that discipline around money, and that's helped me.
What does that mean? Like, what are some of the weekly or monthly or even daily things that maybe you realize that everyone doesn't do, but I do it in regards to your money? Like, do you have
a what?
Budget?
Do I have a budget? What I do, I get my salary, and then I just hive a lot of it off. So it just goes. So anything that's left in my bank account is basically my budget. And I just spend that on things I want. But I'm quite disciplined at putting money away and putting it into the long term and investing in things. So I've always been quite good at investing in the future. And I think that keeps me disciplined. And I've always had you know, a principle, even when I didn't earn much money compared to now. If I can't afford to buy it, you know, cash at the time, I just won't buy it. I don't do credit. So yeah, and even when my first job, I earned £50 a week or something like that. But I've always had this view, and that again came from my mum. from, a single parent living on a very small salary. It was, if you can't afford to pay for it there and then, Karen, don't buy it. And that's kind of stayed as my mentality, which is a bit bizarre, but it's these little things, isn't it, that kind of. So I've always been pretty shrewd or prudent with money.
That's amazing. It's not a regular thing. So if you look at some of I just did a survey for women, particularly it was women, but it was actually men too, just regards to your discomfort around money. How do I solve it? How do we help you solve it? What are the things that you're uncomfortable with? And that principle of just putting everything away and then just taking out a little bit so that I just deal with my case, and pay for my things every month. Barely anyone does that. It's definitely the credit side.
I'm old school.
It's not old school, girl. It's rich school. Stop your nonsense. That's what makes you rich. One of my favorite books, The Millionaire Woman Next Door, is that's what millionaire women do. So 99% of the women out there who are millionaires, who made it their own, so they didn't inherit from their husbands in any kind of way, or they have they're not like movie stars, or that's like 0.01% of them, but most of them, just those solid kind of millionaires, that's what they do. They're like, yeah, look, pretty much I put away, I would say 80% of my salary, always have, and then I grow. That 20% is what I live with, and I may, my salary may grow and grow and grow, but it's the percentage that never changes. It's always more put away, put away, put away, put away. It's one of their principles. The Millionaire Woman Next Door, fantastic book.
Oh,
so that's the exploring, some of the things that we were exploring. So, the don't do credit, same thing, the long-term investment, and, the modest living as well. So, thank you for that. This is gold, people. This is gold. These are the kind of things like I say, I'm not even looking at you guys. I'm looking at myself in the mirror as well. Okay, so Hannah, how did it go? I'm the perfect finance, by the way. So this is not Judgment City.
Yeah. I mean, that's me now. That wasn't me before. Like, I'm literally just like, mine was like learning by failure, just being straight up and honest. And I think it's part and parcel of having a family so young as well. So part of my need to save was just been driven by the fact that there were more humans that needed to eat food more than I needed to go out.
Yeah.
But I think from my perspective, same thing. So my parents having a small budget to live off of, but I think that also gave me just more of a hunger to be like, well, now I've got some money down, I want to spend it and have more. Because my mum was so strict with us. She was like, you'll only eat from my food. Who knows what these people are cooking? So I didn't even have like a taste of McDonald's. I didn't even know what it was until I had money. I was like, oh, I could do anything now. So lots of that. And then I'm also married to a man who isn't like a typical man who's like, don't buy those shoes. My husband's like, buy those shoes, girl, you've earned them shoes, which is really bad. I'll come home, there's no secret hiding the shoes. He's like, you should have got the other pair, and I'll like have like anxiety and take the shoes back. So, definitely, we made lots of mistakes. We bought a house quite early, which is good actually. So I bought a house at 21, and we kind of moved out, and that teaches you, right? Because then obviously you've got a mortgage to think about, and so I think a lot of it just was like I fell into. So it wasn't as planned as would have liked it to be. But definitely now, that's very different. And definitely as the money started to rise and I started to realize what my income potential was. So if you'd asked my younger self this, I had no idea that I'd earn this kind of money. It just wasn't something that I thought was attainable. Success maybe, but just not earning that kind of money at all. So then there became a sense of responsibility. Like, no, you should really cherish this and do something with it, and don't be, frivolous. So yes, I like Karen, like my shopping. But I have a self-filter where I'm like, this is enough, this is enough, and we won't go past this. And then just making your money work for you. So again, when you reach a certain point, there's all of these banks that are available to you. Like, people might not even know that, but once you reach certain thresholds, even lower than people think, there are different accounts that you can set up and let them help you to make your money work for you. So that's another thing I would, I'd recommend, that free services within banks that you should explore, not just with your own bank, but see what others start to can offer you as well, that help you to make your money last and make your money work for you.
But then what are some of the habits and disciplines that you practice that you know contribute towards you keeping your money in your pocket?
That basic budgeting, right? So in terms of, for me, it's the a bit like what you spoke about before. So putting money aside, and that's all well and good for my savings plan. But then there's also, right, what do I want to achieve? So if it's a holiday, so this year it's a cruise, right? I want to take my family on a cruise. All of the family are coming. So what do we have to do to get there? That doesn't touch the savings plan I've already got going, and doesn't touch my standard budget for like all my bills that I've got to pay. So this is going to be a separate spend, a separate account. I'm going to set up and focus specifically to do something lovely that I want to do. So I think that's something as well, you know, and then each month working out that budget, and making sure that I stick to it. And then you have your contingencies as well, right? So I never used to plan for that. Like, what if my car breaks down? What if the washing machine's gone? Because then if you're living paycheck to paycheck, when that happens, all of a sudden, what do? Is it that you don't wash your clothes? Like, you know, so that's why to avoid
Go to mom's house.
right, exactly. Yeah. To avoid that credit. That's what I have, like a contingency budget as well.
Oh, that's
lovely. I
have
three accounts. I have three accounts. I have where my money goes when I get paid, and then everything then just gets distributed out of there on the sort of day 3. So what's left is there to live off. Then I have some of that money out of that goes into a bit like you said, a contingency. I call it a slush fund. So it's there for the emergencies and if I need it. And then the other account is the house and the domesticity pot, so all the food or the house things comes out of that particular account. So I kind of have 3 different accounts that I can just move the money to where it sits best, and that helps discipline. So I think if you have everything in one account, again, keeping on top of it and making sure you're sticking within that budget just makes it a little bit harder. So I just set them up in different ways that I can only get access to them as and when I need them.
I see. So people, this is a big tip right here. You know, like investigating a combination of and saying, look, there are banking products out there that you guys don't know of. So make sure that you're optimizing your banking relationships and looking at the products. And then my girl Karen saying, yo, she has 3 accounts. Like, it's not just the one. And then you just feel like all your money is in one big pot. 3 accounts where you can say, hey, these are the bills. These are the things that I got to do to just live on planet Earth today, like the gas bill, you know, then these are diverse all of your money, like a lot of your money, a big percentage of your money into the savings so that it's a long-term investment. And then whatever's left, you just be like, that's what I have to spend this week. That's what I have to spend this month.
As well. So like there's all sorts of benefits that you get given as pensions. Make sure your money's working for you, right? So if you've got a savings account, check in on it. Is it actually doing anything? Am I making any money off of this? What kind of pension is this? Would I be better for the private pension? It's almost like comparing your utility bills. It's the same thing. You're putting all this money into other places. Make sure you're actually getting a return on it as well. So
see, optimizing the return, my friends. So, you know, we're almost there to the time where we're just like, it's almost 7:30. And so I wanted to make sure that I allowed both of you to just say, you know, final messages, encouraging thoughts, anything that, you know, you want people to know that they didn't have a chance to know about beforehand, or you didn't have a chance to talk about it earlier. Is there anything that you'd like to share just in terms of a closing thought about you, about life?
I think one thing I'd say is just being a bit more strategic about what you want to do. So one thing that I find a lot of times in my role or my friends, the people I meet constantly, it's almost like waiting for everyone to recognize how hard you work, you know, and that's one game plan. But another way is for you to take control of what you actually want to happen in your career. So it doesn't mean that because you're working hard, no one's noticing, but actually if you've got suggestions, if you've got thoughts, do something with those, right? So find the people who are the influencers, find the people who could lead to the next job, and seek those people out. And if you don't know what that is, then what I did was I printed out the job description of where I wanted to be and just started to tick off, have I got this? Have I got this? So at the point of interview, I can say, yeah, I've done all of that. So whether that's qualifications that you have to get on the side that I did, that was my little side hustle whilst having my children, going out and getting more degrees to the point where no one could tell me I wasn't educated enough, or whatever that needs to be. I would say find your competitive advantage at work that makes you know that you can stand out and have the confidence to push yourself.
Lovely.
And mine would be, it's not always about the destination, it's the journey. And sometimes, as Anna said, you'll have to look out for what you want. It might not turn out the way you want it in the first, the first time you try something. But you have to be resilient. You have to be, persevere, and make sure that you take the advantage of the lessons that you learn along the way. Some of the failures that you may have end up being your best learning opportunities to be more successful. I think of some of mine being catastrophic and how that's kind of propelled me to the next level. So yeah, always think about, set the destination, but also the journey, the opportunity to take the advantage of the things you learn on that journey and the experiences that you get. And sometimes people say, Karen, well, it took you 21 years or 20 years to be a partner at PwC. Do you think you should have been shorter? And my response to that, it was the right time, when the time was right, and that for me was, and it was never a sprint for me. It was always a marathon. It was always something I wanted to achieve, and once I got there, that I'd do it well. Because I have seen people who try and accelerate too quick, too fast, and they can burn out, or they can get there too quick, and it ends up not being what they expect. So I was very comfortable, and when I got made partner, as I said, it was the greatest success for me at that time, because the opportunities and the learning experiences have been life changing for me. So yeah, I was very grateful.
Talk about take too long. They don't know what it's about. They don't know it's a part of those people.
I know. And but yeah, like I say, for me, it was just kind of, it took as long as it took, and I knew, but when I stepped into the role, I knew I was ready to do the role. So there was no kind of, I've got here too soon, I don't know what I'm going to do. I was very clear about what I wanted and how I was going to deliver that role, and what kind of a leader I wanted to be, what kind of a person I wanted to be. So it took as long as it took.
Exactly. By your own measuring stick, my friends. Measure yourself by your own measuring stick, whether it be to set the goals for your life or how you get to the goals in your life. Don't be doing it according to other people's stuff, because it never works. And you usually end up unhappy when you do it according to other people as well. So thank you guys so much. We've come to the end, and I can't thank you enough for being really kind of open and honest and sharing about your experiences on how to be a success, because definitely the both of you are. And so it was really special to have the three of us online together. It's very rare. I don't think I've seen this. It makes me feel like I need to do like a network membership group or something. But it was really, really lovely to share that with you. And next week, we are back, my friends. So please, you can send your questions in advance. And you can register on the link that we are about to send out. But thank you so much for your questions. Thank you so much for attending. I hope I addressed them all. You guys are saying yes, we did. You did address them. Thank you. You have everything that you need about life coaches and finances and books. And yes, thank you so much, Karen and Hannah, for being the wealth, the resource, the fount of wisdom. And I will speak to you all very soon.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. I don't even know how to end the webinar.